Today on the Motivity podcast, we have Lauren from Rubrick. And, Lauren, we keep hearing about the security industry. We know that every company needs security employees. We also know that there's a limitation of employees out there and a pool to pick from. We're trying to understand, why is it so important to go into this field? Why is information technology so important? And Lauren, you're going to tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into this industry, and ultimately, why do you hear about this word security so much? Why do you think there's such a need for talent? And, maybe we could talk through some of the personality traits that you think are important to this job, because it's not all about coding. It's not all about what you can do on a computer. You don't need to live on a computer anymore. You can be out in the field. Yeah. So we're going to deep dive into it. Thanks for listening. You heard it here. Yes, we have Lauren from Rubrick, and we're super excited. Lauren, first of all, tell everybody what Rubrick is. I know, but I don't think that the listeners know what Rubrick is. Great name, great positioning in the market. Give us a high-level overview of what you guys do in the enterprise space, or in the company space, I would say.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Rubrick started as a data protection company, right? Really focusing on backup. But about 8 years ago, right? They're still pretty young. I could spend an hour on the backup piece, but we're not going to go there, because you're right. Security is the forefront of everything. And 9 out of 10 conversations I have are security focused right now. So I guess their original architectural considerations lent themselves to build this really security-focused, resilient, hardened platform.
And this was only 8 years ago that they had a security focus in mind as a forefront for backup.
So 8 years ago, they started at backup. They built these things into the architecture, and then probably within the past 3 to 4 years, with the rise of ransomware attacks in the enterprise space, they started to see, really, those features are the critical features that customers need, and have completely shifted into focusing on how we can help customers mitigate and remediate and recover from ransomware attacks.
So, Lauren, if you're a customer listening to this, right, what are some of the questions that a customer can ask you to understand how is security built into your portfolio?
Yeah.
What do they need to understand about that, right? So we understand architecture. They understand they're going to buy a product, but tell us how the security lies, or where are the layers?
Yeah.
And what are you protecting against? I know you said ransomware.
Yes, ransomware is the hot one. So.
And we'll go into what ransomware is, but let's start there. Go a little bit further into the security piece.
Absolutely. So at Rubrick, when we talk security with customers, we're kind of talking about 5 pieces of it, right? Data is the critical layer. Everybody's applying security to the network side, to their servers, to their platforms. But what's critical now is having security at the point of data.
And where does this data rest? Why is this data so important?
So the data is important, right? Everything's digitized now, right? Hospital records, business records, your analytics, companies' analytics for how they're going to pursue revenue, revenue tracks. Everything is stored digitally now. Nobody's keeping paper records. So the data is literally all these, structured and unstructured files that consist of the good stuff that businesses are doing.
So let me ask you a question, Lauren, because and listening to this, if I'm an owner of a company, right? What was I doing in the past different than what am I doing now with my data? What is the nuance that came into the market? And we understand the ransomware, but what was I doing with that data? Why is it so important to add or have security into that data piece now?
I think the thing that's driving importance at the data layer is again the ransomware story, right? So ransomware attacks are designed to break into your critical IT systems and not just lock you out and then ask you to pay money to unlock those files.
I would never pay money for anything, but I think I would at this point. If someone locked me out of my data, I would be like, it's fine, here's my money. And I get it, but we don't, you want to protect against that.
Yeah, exactly. it's funny, we were at our sales kickoff a week ago, and we did a ransomware tabletop simulation. And it was very cool because they had, act 1, scene 1, and you're walking through as the CISO, as the app support manager, as the IT ops manager.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I feel like my heart would be pounding.
It was terrifying. You get to day 1, you just get hit and everybody's trying to figure out who needs to pull back what data. Can they pull back data? And then it's the CISO is really confident we can get it back, but he doesn't know what his operations guys are doing. And then, you get into day 3 or day 4 of the simulation, you're like, oh my God, like they should just pay the ransom. Why aren't we paying the ransom? And, that's kind of the proposition, the end of it with Rubrick is like, we're trying to enable you to not have to pay that ransom.
And so people listening, data is so important because that is that is the meat of the enterprise. That's all the information you've ever stored. It is in one place. So getting to that data would be awful to an enterprise. It would be the worst case, one of the worst case scenarios.
And I mean, it's
not
happening.
And it's happening. And so building security layers into not only backing up the data, but if someone got in, what would happen?
Right.
And that's what makes the product so powerful.
Right. So kind of coming back, there's these 5 tenets, right? The first is, are your backups good? Have your backups been compromised as part of this? Is the architecture and the structure of your backups, are they good? Right? That's step 1.
Probably not. Just kidding.
Probably
most.
Maybe. Kidding. It depends, right? It depends on who your vendor is, what you set up, all kinds of things, which we can definitely dig into. The second piece is, do I know how much has been compromised? What's the blast radius of an attack? How many servers are compromised? How many aren't, right? And can you determine that with the tools you have? The third piece is like sensitive data. What sensitive data do I have? Were credit cards exposed? Social security numbers, banking data, healthcare data? How do I know what was exposed and what could have potentially been pulled out by those guys? That would require us to do like duty to notify or some kind of like civil action to protect our consumers and our business. The fourth piece is being able to get back to a clean state quickly, right?
And how long does that usually take?
So ransomware is a long campaign. Hackers get into your system, and it's not like day one, they encrypt everything, right? They're in there for a few months at a time, and they're just collecting data. They're seeing what other systems they can access. So usually, they could be in there as many as 2 to 4 months. They could be in your system for 2 to 4 months. And how do you get back to a clean enough copy where you can prevent them from re-encrypting again should you, pull from a backup and get stood back up and running?
Lauren, how would you even recover from a ransomware attack, and what advice can you give? I think can you take the advice from, even buying technology, right? What advice could you give a leader listening to this, right? Of things to think about, but advice that you see in the marketplace.
So there was actually a really great article on ZDNet probably a month ago now, talking about the different ways that you can protect your systems. Regular patching of your systems, firmware updates, that's table stakes. Everyone should be doing it. Work with your vendor sales teams and sales engineers to get there and make sure you're mitigating risk from a security standpoint, but knowing that everybody can't necessarily be on what companies call target code.
Right, and go through that for just quickly, because obviously I know it as well. If there is, malicious ransomware out there, it is notified to all the companies, and the companies immediately push out code, and they tell you have to update certain code or certain firmware, right, or certain software, and you have to take that advice immediately.
Absolutely.
Drop everything and press go.
Right.
So listen, stay, and I think that your advice is stay on top of that information.
Absolutely.
I think there was one reason, I don't remember the name.
Log4j.
Yeah, correct.
Log4j was a big one, right? And a lot of companies use pieces of Log4j in their software. So if they used it, they needed to create either like a small patch, just like a hotfix or something to that effect, or actually do some kind of major release patch to address that, so that they weren't exposed.
So, and listening to manufacturers, the companies that you work with, send emails. What do we need to do? We know this is out. How to, follow that procedure. Okay, next.
Yeah, it's not us, the sales engineers, being annoying, right? We're not just out to make you upgrade so we look good. It's because there's legitimate reason to do so.
And Lauren is a sales engineer. We're going to get into her background and why, getting into this market is so important. I just love talking about security. So
I do too.
I kind of jumped right in.
It's my first love, so no worries.
Yeah, so keep going through the article.
Yeah, so, we talk about patching your systems. Yep. That's a big one. The other one that's been around for a long time is keeping your people trained on how they can protect the data. Humans are the weakest link when it comes to security.
Pen testing to see if they click on a link. That's, getting your engineering team or your ISO team or your security team to be talking and to do trainings, because all manufacturers offer training. So understand, UI interfaces, understand, if something happened, get familiar with the products as much as you can, right?
Yeah. And even just like from a social basis, right? Having trainings that teach people not to click on phishing links, or, hey, if you're going to go to a coffee house and do work, make sure you're using the VPN. Don't use the public Wi-Fi unless you're connected to VPN. So people won't be able to scrape your passwords or critical information.
And it's interesting because I'm taking it from working at Cisco, where security is one of our major focuses, right? Mm-hmm. And security is built into all of our products. I never really think about it because it kind of happens for me so easily.
Yeah.
And that's what's great working at a company that has a lot of software, but companies that don't really need to look at multi-factor. They need to look at VPN. Those pieces are very important to making sure your employee is secure and behind some kind of firewall before they just hit the internet, because there's a lot of malicious websites out there, and we see that, or I see that. I saw that this morning.
Yeah.
Hey, you can't click here.
Right.
I wouldn't know that if, and sometimes when your cell phone connects, obviously there's...
It's kind of, if you've used a public Wi-Fi before, you might actually have it saved, and then it auto connects, and then you're doing business on a public Wi-Fi.
Don't just connect to Starbucks 101.
Don't just connect to Starbucks. Everybody's guilty of it. I'm sure I've done it. But if you're going to conduct critical business, then just don't do it.
All right, next one.
Yeah. So you actually touched on it, and that's multi-factor authentication, right? It's not just your username and password is enough anymore. You have to have something which is your password, and something you have, which is this token, one-time use kind of password
and
situation.
There's a lot of great products out there. I've used Google, obviously. I use Duo, and a lot of companies use Duo now. So, other companies are using the same platform, so you actually don't need multiple applications to do multi-factor. You can use one that's, maybe more widespread, like Duo, or like Google, which is cool.
I use the Google Authenticator. I have like my crypto account on there, as well as my Rubrick labs, and like everything's in there, and make it really easy to do. Which is great.
Even multiple companies too. So they might have multi-factor, and they use these corporations. So all you probably need is a QR code or whatever the setup is. But this is easy functionality. I just want to go back to one quick thing, and I talk about this with my friends, and I talk about this with a lot of people. Please don't just use one password for things.
Yes.
Security encryption of passwords is huge. Let the computer suggest passwords. Keep them in a password keeper. I don't know. Use Apple. I know they have a password locker. If you want to use an application that you pay for $30 for the lifetime of that, and do backup, your password should be complex. Letters, digits. You should not be able to memorize one of your passwords. Yeah. None of them. At this level, and I think that goes for anyone listening. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Yeah, so there's a few different schools, right? It can be something that you can't remember, or if you do a long phrase, it can be a number of things you remember, right? Like there's something unique that your cat does on a weekend, and you can make your password a string of 5 different words. It's like 24 characters long. Nobody's gonna guess that, right? Which is great, right? It's not something that a random password cracker is going to be able to pull out.
Or use the platforms that are there. Google has one, Apple has one.
LastPass, if you like the portability of a web application, something that can create a really complex password. You're right. That's a great option also.
Yeah, I just want to I tell everyone.
I love it.
Get a password keeper. I don't care what you use.
Yes.
All right, next one.
Yeah. So least privilege access, right? This is specific to the IT operators, and that's saying, hey, your users aren't going to have administrative privileges on boxes. They don't need it.
That's a new one. I've heard this recently. I've actually heard a couple customers asking me about this.
Yeah.
You can't just go touch that.
Yeah, like your finance guy isn't going to have access to go and work on legal servers. It's not his thing. So you're going to have a very big separation of duties, separation of access. Really kind of, again, like this concept of zero trust. Trust nothing, trust no one.
Trust nothing, trust no one. No one should be touching it. It's kind of like your kids.
Pretty much.
Right? Don't touch that. Don't touch that. It's kind of the same idea, but now you need, certain software to do that or enable that.
Exactly.
And is that the last one?
The last one is like my personal buy-ins and experience, right? This is important to me. It's kind of where I got started in IT, and now I've come full circle. Rock solid data governance. So this is that sensitive data piece. Like, what sensitive data information do you have out there? Where is it located? Who can access it? These are all important, critical things to know, and things that you can address before you're ever at risk of a ransomware attack to limit your exposure should you be hit.
And how would you know that information? Is this some kind of information you could run?
Yeah.
Or is it yet?
So there's a bunch of different tools out there, right? You can approach it from a security aspect. There was a company I used to use. It was called Identity Finder. It's called something new now. I think it's Spirion is the new tool. That's something that information security teams might use. Plug for Rubrick. Rubrick has a sensitive data discovery tool built into our system. It's running on your backups, so it's not causing any extra processing on your primary data set, but still giving you that insight to what you have out there, who has access.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
These are a lot of cool products. And any other products that you feel like you should talk about, giving education to someone listening, right? And they're like, okay, these 5 things now. Is there anything else, other little nuances or any other, advice that you would give? Just being in the space and being a sales engineer, you really understand the features and functionalities of the platform.
Yeah.
Or advice you want to give to like the security, anybody from a security engineering team? What kind of advice would you give?
Yeah, I think it just comes down to to keep it simple, people, process, and technology. Your people need to be aware, alert, and security minded. So you have to keep them trained, right? We talked about that. From a process standpoint, that's least role-based access. So limiting who has access to what, and then also enforcing use of multi-factor, right?
What's the hardest one to install? What's the hardest one? Maybe not to install, right? To enable.
So the hardest piece and this is, personal bias, but your backups, right? Encryption's around and everybody says that they have immutability, but, in the event of if you had an Active Directory attack, can your local accounts be protected by multi-factor? Are there tools in place to lock access to prevent changes to your backup policies? Another interesting one that we talk about is NTP poisoning. So if you have the network time protocol, it's an authoritative time server that companies use to make sure all their systems are synced up. And backups historically can be affected by that, because if someone came in and told your time server it was 3 years in the future instead of today, all your backup policies expire at 1 year, say, they're just gone. So we at Rubrick recognize that's an issue, and a lot of people are starting to by using a monotonic clock, which measures the amount of time your backups have existed, not what year is it? What year is this supposed to expire?
Wow.
So it's crazy.
Do you feel like people in the information technology sector are overwhelmed by all the products? Like, I hear that and this is just feedback that I get, which I could be wrong, right? That the product line is changing so fast, it's hard to keep up. So how do you keep up, right? And I think that's a good question. Like, how do you stay on top of, I don't know, news, and where do you, get that information from? Social media? Like, what do you read? What platforms?
Yeah. So I like ZDNet a lot.
Yeah.
I like the Register. They're a little bit snarky, but they have great information as far as, security best practices and different things that people have done, what vendors are out there doing, what vendors are out there not doing. So they're an interesting kind of, rebel news source.
I like really a little rebel.
Them.
Listen, I think that, and I think, your space and my space, it's all about helping the customer. If you can't solve the problem, at least give advice of where to solve the problem, right?
Exactly.
If you can't do what the product should do, or you're not solving for that use case, or you haven't solved for that problem, then there's another solution out there. Like, it's okay, manufacturers, platforms, whatever we are.
Nothing's going to be a one-stop shop. It's impossible. And there's so many pieces, right? There's so many layers to security. It's your people, it's the perimeter, it's the network, it's the servers, it's now your backups. So there's a lot to manage.
And who do you interact with the most? You interact with, is it the CIO? Is that you're having these levels of conversation? Is it more, an engineer from that team, an architect, like a security architect that's digging into this? Where do you align your efforts?
So typically our first calls, they kind of range, right? We're talking to people at the administrative layer. Most of the conversations now are happening with the information security team first, not necessarily the team handling data backup or data protection and backup.
Interesting, because that's usually the network team.
Yeah, but we are getting the attention of people higher up the stack, directors, CISOs, CIOs, people that really, their jobs rely on not getting hit with ransomware, not exposing their company to millions of dollars of losses, right?
God, it's so much money.
It's so much money.
And it happens, right? It's happening daily. So you have to be protected on all these different layers.
It just happened to the 49ers, right? The week of the Super Bowl, they got hit with ransomware, right? Nobody's safe. If a football team's information isn't safe, what's to say about, businesses that are bringing in millions and billions of dollars for other critical
And as
articles.
you're saying, it's a layered approach. It's not a one-stop approach, right? It's a layered approach. It's a people process things, right?
Yep.
And it's a pillared approach, right? It's a strategy. It's not just a one-step process.
Right.
What about internally? Like, what advice can you give about internal communication and operationally? How do you, or what advice can you give, like, how to communicate more effectively internally? Because I think we see that a lot of silos are built.
Yeah.
And that kind of complicates it too. Like, there should be, maybe a board or a group of decision makers, talking through every part of the enterprise. But
there should, right? And shops that are doing things like lean or ITIL kind of processes.
What's ITIL? I don't know.
It's information. I'm gonna botch.
Okay, no worries. We're not going to use that
acronyms stands for, but it's basically a methodology that brings all your different owners in IT together in order to complete a project. So, hey, we want to harden our environment. So you've got network, you've got security, you've got a project manager, you've got business application owners. You have people that just use the business, right? And they're all having say in how that works. So that's a great methodology. Other than that, I think.
And do you push for the use cases? Do you push for them to solve for X amount of use cases?
I think that's at the discretion of the higher ups, right? What the CIO feels is important to tackle, what your directors feel is an important goal for this year, being able to make that determination and then approach a product with this methodology that's iterative, that involves a lot of people who touch the environment in different ways.
Right. And that's a good point. Everyone does touch the environment in different ways and has or hears different needs from business people working at the company. So everyone's getting a flow of information. I guess what we're saying is share information internally, because then, you're going to ultimately make better buying decisions and better product decisions because you have identified need, not just from your standpoint, but a multifaceted standpoint. So
absolutely. Yeah. And now tools are so tightly integrated, right? The IT people have security features. The security features are tied into data protection. Your data protection's tied into like ServiceNow or another self-service application. Everybody has to kind of work together, right? You can't just have this siloed information. I only touch the network. That's all I do. You have to go to this guy for anything else. The tools don't even allow for that anymore. So just approaching things from a more collaborative standpoint.
And there's a lot of interoperability. Ask the questions, right? Yes. And even ask the manufacturers, and sometimes it does fall to the manufacturer starting point, but they have integrations, and who do they recommend? I mean, this is where we see
absolutely
a lot of strategy going into, hey, we built this on this technology. It's certified through. Or this partner does this. So we're happy to give all that.
Lean on your partners and your sales engineers to tell you what products work well together, where you might find hiccups, right? Your engineer is kind of going to be your outsider perspective when you're bringing in new technology or you're, upgrading to a newer technology platform you're already on. They're going to tell you where it'll work in your environment, how it's going to interact with your applications, everything like that.
Lauren, you gave great advice. I mean, really did, from this pillar approach of security. Just take me back a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about your background, because it's amazing. Talk to me about where you came from, where you are now. Some maybe certifications. Maybe if someone just wanted to even get in touch with you, how would that even happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Rochester, New York, which is super cold.
It is cold. Are you a skier?
No, I'm not. I've gone snowboarding a handful of times, but I haven't been in years. I had the opportunity to go this winter, and I chickened out. I sat in a hot tub instead.
Well, that's a lot more. That's a lot warmer. I did just get heated socks recently because I do ski, and I got heated gloves. So let me just tell you.
How does that work?
Oh, it's a battery. And you charge your battery, and then you put it in the socks. I know. So game changer. I was warm all day, and I put them on my kid because I didn't want to have him crying. So this is how I think. Like, it's funny. I go into a whole situation like, what could I possibly, what could be like an issue for me during that day?
Yeah.
What can I do up front that I could avoid that conflict? And
that's
so,
such an IT like personality thing, right? That's
Totally.
you've been in industry a long time. When you wake up and you're like, I'm gonna do these things today. Here's all the things I need to do to make it not suck.
Right. That's exactly how I think. Like, I will plan out just to avoid any problems. It
Yes.
worked because he was like, "Oh, this is great."
Yeah.
You know,
I gotta get
learn.
some heated socks. That sounds amazing.
I'm gonna put them on my site, on my blog, because everyone keeps asking me about them, and they do work. So anyway, but yeah,
Yes.
going back to
So-
and tell everyone what a sales engineer is, please. No one knows. We need people in the IT industry.
Yes.
Kind of tell, what do you like about your job?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Rochester Institute of
Yeah.
Technology, right? I graduated with a degree in network and system administration, so it was a technical
Oh,
background.
awesome.
But you don't have to have that to be an effective sales engineer, right? You need to. We're technical consultants to our customers. We're just trying to learn and understand what technology a customer is leveraging. What servers, what network, data protection, dependent on our role and what our company is doing. But we're also trying to understand their operational goals and issues they see, and then architect something that makes that admin's life way easier. That's the whole of this role, right? So a lot of people who come out of college with IT degrees think that it always has to be coding or it always has to be in front of a computer. You don't deal with people. Absolutely not, right?
Well, now we're just in front of screens, but we'll get back out to the
we'll
workforce.
get back out there. If you're a people person and you like the idea of every day being something different, there being a new challenge,
I love the word challenge.
Yeah, walking in front of a healthcare customer and then walking into a finance institution, right? And then two totally different sets of problems there, two totally different IT stacks, and you're solving for different things they're trying to do.
And you're learning so much.
Always.
Understanding, again, how they are operationally working, how they buy, how they manage, how they support. Like, all these pieces are different conversations. So it is a great field. It's exciting to be in, and it's definitely changes every day. But
it does, right? And especially we are all so connected to technology now. If you have a basic aptitude for technology and technology troubleshooting, but you're also a social person, you like being in front of people, the role of a sales engineer or being a technology sales architect or even like directly like managing the business side of things, right? Doing account executive work in the technology space. It's a great role to get into.
Yeah, and I love that, the aptitude just to, even if you're, you use applications on your phone, but you're, diving deep into maybe the settings and the system preferences. And, just if your curiosity is there, kind of, maybe explore this field a little bit. I love it. Obviously, you love it, Lauren.
I love it, yeah.
And a lot of people do, but there's so many different not even qualifications, so many different jobs. I mean, it's endless. And, just the field is great. Look at it. Obviously, big tech is, I think, where it's at. But
agreed.
Yeah. So, definitely doing that. And just, having this growth, being at Rubrick, I love it. I just want to kind of finish up with the the protection piece.
Yes.
Explain and I'm just kind of pivot for a second. Explain just, what kind of data that companies do back up. Like, why is it so important to back up your data?
Yeah.
Don't have bad data. Good data is the best kind of data.
Good data is the best kind of data, and secure data is even better, right?
Yeah.
So it's, you start and you think about we call them tiered applications. So we have these things called tier 1 applications. What does that mean? That's probably like your databases where all of your data is housed.
Give an example, like.
Yeah, so like SQL or Oracle, if you're a financial firm, right, and you're tracking a bunch of analytics around, what markets are moving on day-to-day basis, that's all those transactions are going to be fed through a database system, and you want to make sure that you have all that data, right? It's going to help you trade today. It's going to help you trade in the future. So you need that access to those databases, or again, like the concept of data lakes or data warehouses, which are just, databases at scale, huge. Take a normal database, blow it up by 10, and then do analytics against it.
So imagine if someone got into that data, and if they got to it, what happens to it? Where does it go? It leaks out to the internet. I mean, the snowball effects. And
right, or like for healthcare, right? Healthcare is a huge one. They were one of the first verticals to be targeted by ransomware, and they're still very prevalent. Because if you think about it, if you bring down a hospital, you have access to social security numbers, you have access to health records, you have access to credit cards. If you shut down a hospital, people's lives are literally at stake.
Right.
The hospital has to come up quick, which makes, the malicious people say, oh, they're just going to pay the ransom, right? They have to be up and running.
They have to be. Matt, I mean, all the devices are connected to the internet, what are connected to the network.
Everything.
It is a snowball effect.
There's sensor data in healthcare now, right? There's sensors attached to the bed, to your cardiology stuff, all of that.
Yeah. I think there's 100 devices per room.
Yes. Yes. I think I've heard a similar stat.
Yeah. So could you imagine that, if all goes down, what do you do, right?
Right.
How do you handle that? And I think the advice that you're giving it's a multi-layered approach. It's a communication approach.
Yes.
It's full visibility. It's making sure that the products you buy have interoperability. What other advice can we?
Yeah, again, making sure, and this is my slant, right? This is the Rubrik slant.
Let's hear it. I love it.
Making sure that obviously immutability, making sure that your backups can't be overwritten or changed or modified in any way once they're committed. So that's important, right? Again, being able to have tools attached to that system that allow you to identify which systems are affected and which aren't. The ability to lock it down so that only your backup admins have access, so that they can bring you back up and you don't lose your backups or have policies totally just wiped out if someone were to gain access. So,
right. It's a scary world out there.
It is.
And if someone gets in, you want to alleviate the attack as much as you can get, or you can, right? We know they're going to get in. We know that attack takes a long time. You have I guess it's the beginning, right? The during, after, the beginning, the during, and the after. So, we know it's going to happen. We're just trying to help you protect it, understand it, manage it, and look at it from many different angles. Because I think that's what you have to do.
Yeah, it's all the layers, right? And before, we've always tried to approach it before you got to the data layer. And now, part of what I preach every day is you have to protect the data layer. How are you doing that? How are you managing it? How do you see where your good copies are? How do you know what data they even had access to? And being able to tackle all of that. That's what I do every day. Those are the conversations I have every day.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Lauren, it's a pleasure having you on the show. Just a question, and I just want to close. What kind of clients do you work with now? Do you have a specialty or a vertical?
I'm a little bit of everything.
Okay.
In the Philadelphia area, right? So I'm covering a little bit of healthcare, a little bit of manufacturing, retail. So I'm all over the place.
Yeah,
I think healthcare is my favorite to work with because they really care, right? They really innately care about the outcomes of their patients and who are their customers, and they're really technology. I guess they're open to looking at technology in a different way. So
I agree. Healthcare is my specialty as well. I like the patient experience. I like understanding what their challenges are, and they're relatable because obviously everyone goes. You have to go to the hospital, so understanding challenges becomes more relatable, and it's connected to people, and then you have feelings to make sure that you're doing the best job for them, knowing how much is on the line, right?
Yeah.
And that lies to your responsibility. So I agree. I love the healthcare sector as well, and I want them to be protected, and I want them to learn from this a little bit, right?
Yeah. I want everyone who has contact with me, I want to be protected, right? It's crazy out there. You see these ransomware attacks. At Rubrick, we have over 4,000 customers. We see on average 2 to 3 our customers hit within every 2 weeks. The cool thing is we have a whole ransomware recovery team, and they actually help customers get stood back up and running. And then humble brag, Rubrick is batting 1,000. We have recovered every single customer of ours that's been hit by ransomware.
Did they have to pay the ransomware?
They did not have to pay the ransom.
Wow.
It's incredible. What we're doing is so exciting.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a great stat.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like it's a great company. Obviously I work with Rubrick, but I was happy to let everybody listen to where your placement is in the marketplace, where your strategies lie, what you guys are doing. You're really making a change. So
and thank you for having me. It's
You're
great
welcome.
to kind of get out and talk to your listeners about what we're doing and what we're bringing to the marketplace, and just educating in general on how to be more secure.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Lauren, for coming on the show, and I'll have her link in the bio. You can find her on LinkedIn. And again, if you want to be on the Motivity podcast, just reach out. Have a great day.